32 teams in 32 days. This is episode 5, the Cincinnati Bengals episode. Let's welcome in the man, James Rapien, Sports Illustrated, allbengals.com, host of the Locked On Bengals podcast. James, what's going on?
What's up, Jake? How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. This is going to be an exciting episode.
It is. It's exciting. Bengals draft debate is exciting because we have a real debate. It's like the opposite of last year, where no one was not in on Joe Burrow. Well, this year there certainly is a debate, and I think it's split nearly 50-50 with the diehard fans, which is really interesting.
Yeah, there's been a couple Twitter polls from some of the mainstream Bengals media people, and Sewell Chase has been 52-48, 51-49. It's it is so close, and maybe that's I can imagine it being that split in the front office right now. Them just not knowing what to choose from, and because they're at 5, both of them are probably going to be available. But let's start with free agency because that's what kind of came first. It was another year of spending for the Bengals. Obviously, this new regime with Zach Taylor, for whatever reason, the front office is spending more money on outside guys specifically than they have in the past. Some fans, though, this year not really satisfied. They signed a couple new starters, of course, needing to replace Carl Lawson and William Jackson. What are your thoughts on the direction that they kind of went in this offseason?
The first things first, I was hoping, and I think they were too, from people that I've talked to, that they would address offensive line more. You bring in one starter in Riley Reif, you're hoping to get more than that. You're hoping to add 2 starters in free agency. And they might have done that if you include Quentin Spain, because I think Spain and Xavier Su'a-Filo, at least on paper, compete for that left guard spot. But still, it doesn't feel like it's enough, right? So that's part of it. But on defense, they've invested their resources there for a second straight offseason. You lose Lawson, you lose Jackson. That's painful. But you bring in what I think are a bunch of guys that fit the identity of what they want this defense to be. Physical, hard hitting. I talked to Lou Anarumo about that. He mentioned physical a couple of times. Talked to a couple of different scouts within the organization. Same thing. It's about being more physical. That's what they want. And you look at the guys they brought in, Awuzie, he's physical. He can run. He's got good long speed. I think he's gonna, not afraid to deliver big hits. And he's a playmaker. He made some plays in Dallas, and so that's why you bring him in. And instead of paying Jackson, you get Awuzie and you get Mike Hilton, who's the definition of a playmaker, of a chess piece who can move all over the defense. And so I like those additions. You just wonder how much better is this team now, specifically on defense, than they were at the end of the 2020 season. Because losing Lawson, that's big. You swap him out with Trey Hendrickson. They like Hendrickson a little bit more, but I don't know if he's actually better than Lawson. I don't know if that 13.5 sack production is going to translate to Cincinnati when he doesn't have as much help in the trenches there. So that matters. Larry Ogunjobi, a guy I covered in Cleveland, I think he's certainly an upgrade at the 3 tech. He's going to be in a position to succeed, a position on a 1-year deal to really produce. So that's certainly a signing I like. And then you got Trey Waynes coming back off of injury, DJ Reader coming back off of injury. So this defense looks different. There are a lot of new faces. I think it fits what they're trying to do more from a personnel standpoint. And as it is usually in free agency, there is a gamble. And we'll see if their vision pays off in if they're actually better when you look at the yards given up and the stats and everything like that when the season starts.
So you mentioned the offensive line, and a lot of people will say that they didn't do enough. And I think it's going underrated how huge of an upgrade Riley Reif is from what they had before. Bobby Hart, Fred Johnson, that's huge in itself. And then there's still the draft in about 30 days with probably the most loaded tackle class we've seen in forever.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, to me, and I'm sure we'll talk about the 5th pick, but let's just pretend they don't have a first rounder. Let's say they're like the Rams or Seahawks and trade their first rounder every year. Well, they could still upgrade the offensive line in this draft because there's a ton of guys that are going to be there. Some tackles that, they might start inside. Heck, Penei Sewell might start inside if they draft him 5th overall. I think that's a very real possibility that you start him at guard and you let him develop from there. But, Alex Leatherwood from Bama, I think he's a guy that could certainly start at right guard right away. And there are a bunch. I'm not going to go through each and every name, but that's the thing is I think really through round 4, you might be able to find starters depending on what you're looking for and what you need. And that might not be day 1 type starters, but starters year 2, year 3. And that's the problem with the Bengals is last year, yeah, they had some issues on their offensive line week 1, but Xavier Su'a-Filo goes down before halftime. And now they're suddenly, scrambling there, and they bring in Billy Price. Well, now that's a downgrade. You mentioned Fred Johnson. He had to start at both guard and tackle. They had some injuries. So, yeah, the Bengals starters need to get better. There's no doubt. And Riley Reif, huge upgrade. I mean, he's 50 times better than Bobby Hart. He's going to be consistent. He could kick inside if you need him to. It's just, a huge, huge upgrade. But they also need to upgrade their depth. And that's why I like the Spain move, because let's say Xavier Su'a-Filo is starting. Well, then Quentin Spain's a perfect backup guard on both sides. And if Spain wins the job, then Su'a-Filo is a perfect backup guard on both sides. A veteran guy who could come in and you know what you're getting. And it's not nothing. It's not, oh my gosh, we have to just be on pins and needles and be worried about what we're going to get out of this spot. And that was the case early and often last year due to injury. So increasing the depth of the Bengals offensive line, I think that's as much of a key as anything, especially with Frank Pollock back in town, because they believe in him. They think he can develop these guys. And I certainly think that's an upgrade as well.
So let's go to the opposite side of the trenches now. In the past, the Bengals have shown that they prefer depth on the defensive line. They've even carried 12 or 13 on the roster at some point. And last year, it looked way thin with all the injuries, all the opt-outs. They added Larry Ogunjobi to replace Geno Atkins, re-signed Mike Daniels, who played well. They've been in on Sheldon Rankins. They've been in on Reed, rumored to be targeting multiple interior linemen in the middle rounds of the draft. It doesn't seem like they're done with that position.
It doesn't. And I do wonder if the reason they went after Rankins, the reason they went after Reed, who I know for a fact they weren't expecting to be released. They were in on him. They wanted him. But when you're offering, a 1-year deal or 2-year deal, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who are probably, after all the moves they've made, the favorites, and you're Reed, you probably want to go to Kansas City and see if you can win a ring and then get paid next year when the cap goes back up. So it's just tough to land him. And I think there were about 7 teams in on Reed from what I read. But yeah, I could confirm that the Bengals were one, and it's a need that they knew they needed to address. And I do wonder now, because as we're recording this, they officially signed Mike Daniels this morning. Is that the move? Because he's a solid veteran, a guy you could bring back on a low money 1-year deal. I think it's $2.5 million, and it doesn't prevent you from drafting one of these guys. You bring in a Reed, especially if it's a multi-year deal. Well, now I don't know if I'm going to draft one, because you got Ogunjobi on a 1-year and you got Reed. But in this case, or Rankins for that matter. But in this case, I think there is a chance that that this is what they do, because they're going to address it round 4, maybe round 3, in that range. And I think it's a pretty good draft, not at the top on the interior defensive lineman. Who knows how many go in round 1? It might not be many, but I think second, and then specifically 3rd and 4th rounds, I think they can find someone there that can help and develop behind some of these veterans.
So now to the defensive ends, another position that looked very thin last year. Even Carl Lawson just did not look like he had any help out there. 5.5 sacks was actually impressive based on what the defensive line looked like. Dunlap out the door. Sam Hubbard, not really a great pass rusher. Like they got Hendrickson, who most people would agree is a little bit of a downgrade, but he's young. He still has the potential to maybe not replicate 13.5 sacks, but at least give us 8 or 9. Where do you think they need to go with the edge? Because it's again a stacked position in the draft this year. There should be no reason why they don't add at least one in the early rounds.
No doubt. I think round 3 is probably where I'm at, and it could be round 2. So here's how I view it. Here's what I would do. I would take Jamar Chase at 5 if he's there. And I've not been shy about that. I just think he's a freak. And then offensive line, I think that's the sweet spot value-wise for offensive line, round 2. And then edge, probably round 3. Now, if you talk to most draft analysts, they would say edge, you're probably going to go in round 2. So if they take Sewell, well, I don't think there's going to be a wide receiver worthy of that 38th pick. And that's part of the reason why I want Chase. I don't think most of those guys are going to be there. Terrace Marshall's not going to be there after his impressive pro day, ran well, jumped well. He's going to go in the first round. I think a lot of these guys, Elijah Moore, probably going to go off the board in the first round. So if Rondale Moore's there out of Purdue, well, he's 5'7". They're not picking him. They're just not. I'm sorry. So Diami Brown's probably the only one that might be there out of North Carolina. So if it's between him and an edge, That's interesting. I would still lean receiver, but I think edge is the sweet spot in round 2 and 3. So in my perfect world, I would go Chase, best offensive lineman available, and that could be any number of guys. And there's another case, by the way, Jake, where, and you know this, they're used to trading down in round 2. They did it with Jesse Bates. They did it with Joe Mixon. They did it with Drew Sample a couple of years ago. I wouldn't be shocked if they add another 4th and trade down from 38 to 45 and still get, because if there's 5 linemen they like at 38 and they're fine with any of them and they have similar grades on them and they can add another 4th, well, then that can be, it make it much easier to go after you've gone Chase and a lineman or Sewell and, you know, a wide receiver, let's say. Then you can go edge, interior line on offense and interior line on defense. And you feel a little bit better about the trenches, and you've also upgraded your biggest need. So there's a shot that happens. And I certainly think they'll target edge. I'd say rounds 2 to 4 and probably 2 to 3 if I had to really predict.
Yeah, and they almost did last year too. It just happened T. Higgins was the top of their board. Like, there were rumors that they were also going to trade down last year. It just, they wanted Higgins bad. He was left. He wasn't supposed to be there. So, you know, they were leaning Higgins, Mims. The Jets traded down and still got Denzel Mims. So also, I think, so it's weird because yes, some people go wide receiver and then take best offensive lineman available. The Sewell people say take Sewell. He's the best player. He's the better player, and then take the best receiver available. Yes, I'm in agreement with you that there will be better offensive tackles at 38 or even in the 3rd round. But when you go down the line to the wide receivers, I think there are more guys who could potentially fit the system, like speedsters, Daz Newsome, De'Ami Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, going down the line, yeah, they're not as talented as these offensive tackles, but they fit the scheme.
Sure, absolutely. And shockingly, I want the Bengals, and not only one, they better, considering their lack of addressing the wide receiver position in free agency, and they're not handing out a multi-year deal now. They may add a veteran on a 1-year deal. They need to draft 2. They have a need. It's a big need. And I think some people see Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and even Auden Tate, and Auden Tate is a big fan favorite, and say, oh, they're good. Well, no, they're not. They lost AJ Green. They lost John Ross. Alex Erickson's gone. That matters. I mean, those are 3 guys that at one point or another last season started games or were big special team components. And so, yeah, I think they have 8 draft picks. And who knows, maybe they trade down and add a 9th, you know, and then round 2, round 3 in that range. I could see it. They need to take 2 wide receivers. And to me, when it comes to Sewell and Chase, I don't know where people just started assuming Chase wasn't as good of a prospect as Sewell, or Sewell was a better player than Chase. I think probably half the Bengals fans that are championing Penei Sewell right now didn't know who the hell he was in October or September and never watched him play live. And I'm not pretending like I watched a bunch of Oregon football, because I didn't. But based on what I've gathered, he's got his flaws. And I understand it. And probably if you were watching, you were probably watching Justin Herbert airmail passes at Oregon. And he's figured it out in Los Angeles, at least he appears to. But that's how I view it, is like, yeah, Sewell's good. The physical traits are insane, but he's very raw. Like, that's the thing, is like, I would trust Jonah Williams to be the left tackle. Everyone says, oh, just kick Jonah inside. All these draft analysts, hell no, I'm not doing that. Jonah Williams is much more technically sound and dependable than Penei Sewell, who's young, not as nearly as battle tested, hasn't played in a year. So, like, this idea that Sewell, yeah, is he going to come in and upgrade your line? Absolutely. But is he this savior that's going to keep Joe Burrow upright? And I see these people like, oh, Joe Burrow, here's the injury. Do you want this to happen again? Well, hell no, I don't want to happen again. I know it's an issue, but this idea that Sewell is going to be his just bodyguard that's going to prevent Joe Burrow from ever getting hit, he's going to make mistakes. And not that Jamar Chase isn't, but this idea that Sewell is going to come in and be this all-pro right away, it is not going to happen. And those are really, really high expectations that I hope he's aware of, because that's only happening in Cincinnati. If Atlanta picks him, not a big deal. Miami picks him, not a big deal. Dallas picks him, oh my God, it's the star. It's still not going to be nearly as much pressure as he faces in Cincinnati blocking for Joe Burrow. And there are going to be some people that are shocked if he starts inside, but I will not be. I think there's a decent chance he starts at guard
Yeah, I agree.
if they pick him. And I wouldn't be shocked at all either. And I think this might be the most likely scenario where if he does show well in camp, they put him at right tackle and they keep Jonah at left tackle.
And then would move Reef to inside. And, he
Yep.
said he's going to play right tackle, but, he just
Mhm.
signed. He hadn't even put on a Bengals jersey yet. So maybe there's a route where, yeah, if Sewell impresses at camp, he'll go on the outside to start, and then Reef can go inside. He's the veteran. He probably can do that too. But it's funny because, yeah, I mean, you're totally right. But, the the opportunity to have Penei Sewell's future, like for the next 8-9 years, have those two bookend left tackles. I was I did some research a couple weeks ago. The Saints and maybe Baltimore and maybe New England are the only teams in the NFL to have their bookend tackles secured for the next for the next multiple years, like 5-6 years, because of the Saints, Ramczyk and Armstead. The Ravens have Brown, who might be out the door, and then Ronnie Stanley, and then
Mhm.
Patriots maybe, but the Bengals could very easily be in that conversation, and I think that's very important.
It is. And I don't want to dismiss it, but I'm going to ask you, did Tom Brady stick around for the tackles in New England? I,
No, but
he did.
his two
No,
tackles
he
were
did.
pretty good in Tampa.
No doubt. No doubt. And protecting the quarterback is important. Guess what he didn't go there for? Tristan Wirfs. He went there because of Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and he knew he needed weapons, and he was frustrated because the Patriots weren't giving him weapons. And that's the part of it too. If like Penei Sewell can be the next Trent Williams, but if Jamar Chase is the next, I don't know, T.O., Julio Jones. I mean, that's what we're talking about now with him running a 4.38 unofficial. We haven't confirmed the official time yet, but at LSU's pro day, the production he had, Joe Burrow obviously buys into the kid and is what's the word that he's stumping for him. I mean, to me, it's close, and I would love to have both of them. Of course, I'd want to have Penei Sewell, and this is a good problem to have, by the way, if you're the Bengals.
Yeah.
But AJ Green for 7 years, not a decade, but for 7 years, was the best player on the Bengals offense. He got Andy Dalton a second contract. He helped them make the playoffs 5 straight years. The only reason they didn't win a playoff game is because Jay Gruden didn't understand that throwing to AJ Green and designing the game plan around him was much more effective than doing it around Jermaine Gresham in the playoffs against Houston in year 2 of that debacle of 5 straight playoff losses. So Green was carrying it. Well, you have a guy that might be the next Green, and your quarterback knows him and vouches for him. And so that's the thing is, yeah, would it be great if you could get the next Andrew Whitworth? Let's relate it to the Bengals. And Penei Sewell could be the next Andrew Whitworth. It would be amazing to do that. At the same time, during those 5 straight playoff runs, I think AJ Green much harder to find than an Andrew Whitworth. I can find a competent tackle. You know what I can't find? A guy who's going to carry this Bengals offense. And by the way, you have Joe Burrow now. So could you imagine if it was Joe Burrow to AJ Green in his prime? It would have been insane. And so that's how I view it, is the ceiling. Because Jake, if they don't go with Chase at 5 and they take Sewell, and they don't hit on one of these other, Diami Brown, right? Doesn't turn into a 1. And I don't think he's a 1. He's a speedster. I think he's a really good prospect, someone you could certainly take at 38 and feel good about. But I don't think the wide receiver conversation ends this year. Now we're going into next year saying, hey, we need more weapons, got to surround Burrow with more weapons. And that's going to be the conversation. I want to avoid that. I want to do both. And it's hard to do both. And you have to thread the needle when you have as many needs as the Bengals have. But I think they can do it in the draft. If you go Chase first, now your wide receiver room feels pretty damn good. You can take a developmental prospect in round 6 or 7, or maybe round 5, in that range, late day 3, and address the line rounds 2 through 4. If you do that, I think that's how you maximize Burrow and you maximize this window.
Yeah, so okay. There are plenty of reasons why I have opened my mind up to Jamar Chase a lot more since I don't know, November, and you've seen some of my tweets and from November, October about Jamar Chase. I was bored. He wasn't playing. But yeah, I totally see it and am fine with both of them. But let's move on a little bit. It feels like the Bengals are the only team in the top 5 that doesn't have, all these extra picks. So the pressure is on to hit on these picks just like it was last year. They only own their own picks and then a couple extra late round picks. Last year, the Bengals stacked up later on linebackers, a really crucial need heading into the offseason last year. Do you see them stacking up on a certain position this year, or is it going to be more BPA? Or like for
offensive
need?
line.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It'll be offensive line. Because I think last year they would say they did BPA with linebackers, but I think their linebacker scores, because they were so focused on the position, were a little higher. There was just a little more push for it. And that's my concern being on the team Chase. And like you, I know that both guys are going to make the team better, but they might have just a higher grade on Sewell because of this class and because of how many quality athletes there are. I mean, you see some of these scores, and I get it's pro days, but man, a lot of these guys are testing out of their minds on the offensive line. So I wouldn't be shocked if they took 3. And you could make an argument, and that's the thing, is they need to find versatile guys like a Creed Humphrey, right? A Landon Dickerson, guys that can play guard or center and you feel comfortable with. Well, if they play well, regardless of what veterans you have on the team, then you're going to be able to find a starting spot for them somewhere. And so that's the thing is, I think you're talking at least 2 offensive linemen, even if they go Sewell at 5. They're taking one in rounds 3, round 4, but up to 3. And that's where it should be, because you need to get this pipeline going. Again, the depth in the offensive line room, that needs to up its talent level. It can't be, our starter went down, our right tackle sucks now. It can't be that way. Or our right guard is just horrible. Or, man, Billy Price is down. What are we going to do at center? Because Trey Hopkins can't play center either because he's just not back yet. Well, that you have to have a backup plan. And I think they could also sign one of these veteran guys that they've been rumored to be in on that has ability to play both center and guard. So we'll see there. But I think it is offensive line. And when you look at how deep this class is, much like how they viewed the linebacker class, you're going to be able to find a guy that falls. A guy that I think is interesting is the Stanford kid, Little. I wonder where he goes with all of his injury history.
There's so many of them.
And that's the thing is, it's like, man, it wouldn't be crazy. And mocks don't have this, but if Walker Little falls to round 4, I don't care if you have Sewell or not, just take him and see if you can get the most out of him. Right. And I don't think he'll fall there, but you never know. And so that's where I'm at, is I think some of these guys, Landon Dickerson could still fall to round 3, even though he's doing cartwheels, because he's had multiple knee injuries. I mean, that could hurt some of these guys, and the Bengals are certainly in a prime spot to take advantage. So if there's one good thing, the 2 areas of depth that I think you and I both agree on: wide receiver, there are some guys they can get late day 2, early day 3. Same thing with offensive line. Well, those are their 2 biggest needs right now. So it does line up pretty well.
And then even the third biggest need, edge. I think edge is the deepest position in the class. I think I don't have my rankings on me right now, but I think I have 17 edges in my top 120. The position's crazy this year. And so I can even go one better and just say edge. The Bengals top 3 needs is probably the 3 deepest positions in the class.
Yep. No, I agree with you. And that's the thing, is you said, so your top 120. Well, the Bengals pick 5th, 38, 69th. If you go Chase, Sewell, either one at 5, well, then you're in position to get maybe Diami Brown at wide receiver, but there aren't many wide receivers, but the best edge or best tackle there at 38. And then whatever one you don't get, you can take at 69. And again, we're looking at positions versus players. And I preach all the time, players, not positions. So who knows? But I do think that the value, because that's what matters here. Can you find the value and align it with your needs? And I'm big on that when it comes to the draft. And I think this does work. I think there's certainly a path where they could take 3 guys that are going to be instant contributors with those first 3 round picks. And that's what they did last year, right? And Burrow, Higgins, and Logan Wilson. And hopefully they can do that again, because if you get the 5th pick right and you get the 38th pick right, and you're getting contributions from those guys the same way Burrow and Higgins. And then you have a guy in that you get at 69. That's kind of a rotational type piece like Logan Wilson was last year, but can develop into more. That's exactly what the blueprint should be each and every draft. So hopefully they can pull it off. I think they're in a good position.
And that's a great point right there, because so last year, everyone was pounding their fists for Josh Jones, because he's an offensive lineman. And, Ian Rappaport tweeted right before the draft that Josh Jones could be anywhere from the first round to the end of the fourth. He ended up falling to the third. The Bengals passed on him twice. They took two players that were just higher, like way higher up on their boards. They had a first on Higgins and I believe an early second on Logan Wilson. And they got both in the second and the third at the top of those rounds. So, a lot of people were upset after the draft because they didn't do anything on the offensive line other than getting Hakeem Adeniji, but they got the best players on their board.
Yep, and that's what they would say. I look back and they absolutely should have went offensive line at some point. Obviously not Josh Jones, and honestly, I think part of it was Jim Turner was calling the shots, and he was higher on Hakeem Adeniji and higher on his guys, and now you got an outside voice in Frank Pollock coming back, who doesn't have ties to a lot of these guys, right? Frank Pollock doesn't know Michael Jordan. He probably scouted him and stuff like that, but he doesn't know him. He's not loyal to him. He's not loyal to Bobby Hart, as we've seen. And so that part of it is going to impact this, because they have to keep Joe Burrow upright. That is their number one need. There's no doubt. And so when I say don't take Sewell, take Chase, it doesn't mean that that's addressing their number one priority, their number one need. And so that's the interesting thing now is, where is that priority? Do they try to overcorrect it? Because in my opinion, if they pass on Chase for Sewell, that's the start of that. You're trying to overcorrect it. And they may do it just out of loyalty to Frank Pollock. Hey, let's get you the best developmental prospect we can get you so you could get your paws and mitts on him and make him great. And it might happen. The good news is, and I'm confident in saying this, the guidance is just at another level now. I watched Jim Turner, and I've heard things about Jim Turner, and obviously a lot of people have, and I'm not going to crush him too much, but when I look at him and in the way players reacted to him, and then I look at the way Joe Mixon, Billy Price, and guys just talk about Frank Pollock, even Joe Burrow talk about Frank Pollock, I think that is going to make a difference on this incoming rookie class, especially because they are going to take some linemen, and it's going to be interesting the where, but they are, and they need to, right? Even if wide receiver is the top guy at rounds 1, 2, and 3, well, then you're going to have to pass on him in 2 of those rounds. You can't take 2 receivers in the first three picks. It's just how it is. And the same thing with edge, right? If the edge is the top player at their board at 38 and 69, but you already took one at 38, you may have to look to offensive line here at 69, especially if you didn't take Sewell at 5. So part of it has to be need-based, but hopefully, and I'm optimistic about this, their needs can fit the value in the draft and the way the draft rolls out and the way it plays out. And it's unpredictable, so you never know. A guy like Josh Jones, I remember it, man. It was Josh Jones and Denzel Mims, 33rd overall. Who are they going to take?
Yep.
And Josh Jones wasn't even close to being in consideration. Denzel Mims was, but it was T. Higgins who was the guy that they ended up with. And obviously that has worked out well so far.
Last thing before I let you go, we haven't talked about Kyle Pitts. Give me a little thing about, yes, Kyle Pitts or no Kyle Pitts. Probably not going to happen, but a lot of fans want it. Where are you on that?
I won't argue it. I won't argue it one bit because I think he's a freak. And that's the thing. Draft players, not positions. If I could find a freak, then I want the freak and we'll roll with it. And now, here's the thing. If Chase is there versus Pitts, I think Burrow can work with both of them. But does Chase translate easier? Does he just seamlessly jump into Zach Taylor's offense and make a difference? I think so. I think if the Bengals are going to commit to Pitts and take him 5th overall, well, then they're committing to changing their offense some, which they're capable of doing. I trust Brian Callahan to certainly engineer that. I think he's a really good offensive coordinator. So that would be the key. But as far as drafting him, I won't argue it. I think you can argue he's the best prospect, maybe outside of Trevor Lawrence, or maybe the best prospect in the draft. I can make the same argument for Chase. I think they're neck and neck. I think they're both ahead of Penei Sewell. I know the offensive line class is really good, but I still think that their ceilings and their floors are probably higher than Sewell in Cincinnati because you have the quarterback. And that part of it is a game changer when you're talking about adding a superstar like Chase or a potential superstar like Kyle Pitts. But yeah, I'm in on them if they are. I just, like you said, I don't think they are. I think this is a Sewell versus Chase conversation. And who knows, maybe Atlanta. I am kind of worried about Atlanta. I think Atlanta might look at Chase now and say, this is our Julio replacement. But you know what I need them to say is Julio on one side, Ridley on the other, and Kyle Pitts. And so maybe they'll go with Kyle Pitts.
And we have still a month to go of discussions and endless debates that have no ending until.
Did I sway you? Did I sway you at all, Jake?
No,
I
no,
thought
no,
you were
no.
going to push back more.
No,
Oh, come on.
No, well, you made some good points, but no, I'm still I am still Team Sewell till I die.
Team Sewell or team offensive line? Yeah.
Actually,
See,
no, because last year
positions.
I was Team Denzel Mims. Last year I was Team receiver at 33 last year. So I'm Team Sewell. But James, man, it was awesome having you on.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.